I got my kids looking out for this thing that happens in so many books and movies and stories that we watch where you're tracking the development of a hero in waiting, a hero who might be a hero like Queen Esther in the Book of Esther, who's got all kinds of talent and raw skills and character, but it hasn't yet been refined into the skill set of a hero. They haven't yet made that decision to fully accept the call to heroism and to rise to the task. Where we're at in the end of Esther chapter 4 is the moment where Esther is finally embracing this call to action, this call to destiny, and rising as the hero she is meant to be. But to get to this point, she has to go through a very difficult pinch point that we talked about yesterday, and we're going to talk about more in a minute. And that pinch point is what I have my kids watching out for when we watch shows now. I'm like, hey guys, there's always this moment where the hero often literally passes through a very tight little spot, a cave or a corridor or something that they have to squeeze and wriggle through to get out to the other side. And through this perilous journey, now they're in a position to really see themselves as reborn, as a new person with a new destiny. This is intentional. This imagery is not an accident. It has been woven into storytelling for a really long time. Sometimes this moment of passage or rebirth is presented figuratively. The character is stuck between a rock and a hard place. But quite often it's presented literally as a tight spot that they've got to wriggle their way through. And again, I'm not trying to be gross, but I mean, the tight spot is a metaphor for the birth canal. It's a metaphor for being born anew as a new thing. So now whenever that happens in a movie, my kids start calling it out. I took my boy to go see some ridiculous Kylo Ren, what's the guy's name? Adam Driver film where he goes to ancient Earth or something like that. And there's a sequence right in there where they get stuck in a cave and he's got to find a way to crawl through this tight little spot to get to where he needs to be. And one of the two members of the party is able to do it, and one of the two members of the party is not. And in doing so, one of the two members is reborn anew. Now they truly are born of this strange world in which they live, and the other is still awaiting their rebirth into this new world in which they live. And my kid's like, that's the rebirth sequence. That's it right there. I guess it's more Star Wars stuff, but we were watching an animated Star Wars show called The Bad Batch the other day, which is really, really well written, by the way. That's a better show than you would figure. And there was a sequence in there where the same thing had to happen. A character went through a transformation by climbing through a tight spot. All my kids caught it. And now, if you didn't already have your antenna out for this, you're going to see it everywhere. Well, this is what Esther just went through. Now, it's presented as metaphorical, not literal here. She doesn't actually like crawl through a cave or something, but she's between a rock and a hard place. And that rock and a hard place, that cave, that metaphorical rebirth canal, if you will, is forced upon her by Mordecai, who says, all right, well, you got these two choices. You're either going to die by getting swept up in this purge that your husband has ordered, or you're going to risk death by approaching him uninvited to see if you can find a way to get him to countermand this order. But either way, inaction won't work. Now, again, think about those sequences that you've seen in movies or read about in books where somebody crawls through a tight little space like that. Isn't there always a pressure behind them as well? There's a monster chasing them, or there's a cave-in happening, or the water level is rising. You're running out of oxygen. You can't stay where you are. You are forced into action, die or change. And Esther has been put in that pressure cooker. She's crawled through the cave, and now she's out the other side with a renewed focus and vigor. She's passed the first great test, that is the internal test. Who am I? What will I choose? What am I going to do? And now she's in a position where she's ready to tell other people what to do and how to support her in her taking on the action she needs to take on. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, Esther 4:15. We read it yesterday. We're reading it again. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. Now, some people look at this passage and they're like, all right, that's a reference to prayer right there. I disagree with that read on the text. I don't think Esther is to that point in her development. In fact, the very obvious omission of any kind of reference to God or legitimately to prayer to God or angels or intervention from God throughout the book of Esther, I think is one of the strengths of the book. And so I don't see in this transformative rebirth event Esther just springboarding forward into this mountain, this pinnacle of spiritual maturity, who understands the character of God and is leaning heavily on who God is. I just don't see it. Maybe what we're getting there is a little bit of a bleed through from the apocryphal elements of the book of Esther that we'll talk more about soon. There are later additions to the book of Esther that really change the nature of the story. And so if you're reading that later augmented version of Esther that probably had these additions added to it, maybe 300-ish years after the fact, maybe you're just assuming one thing about it, and that kind of leaks, that kind of osmosis out into societal assumptions about who Esther is and what actually happens in the original Hebrew version of this book, the version that you and I are looking at here. So acknowledging that some Christians are legitimately reading additional words to the ones we have about Mordecai and Esther and their character and their relationship with God, acknowledging that and that could bleed over into our own assumptions, I still have to point back to the actual Hebrew text from which the English version you and I are looking at is derived. That doesn't give us those details. Is she changing? Yes. Is she rising to the moment? Yes. Is she suddenly an evangelical Christian who is summoning her prayer warriors to come to her defense? No, I don't see that. But she is telling Mordecai to mobilize people in, at minimum, a gesture of solidarity to say we've got to focus. We've got to think about what we're doing here, and we have to rally and unify together in this gesture. And surely for many people who agreed to fast, prayer would have been included. Heck, maybe it's included in what Mordecai and Esther do with their fasting. Certainly the later Greek version of Esther thinks that. It gives us two lengthy, detailed prayers right after this passage here at the end of chapter 4, where we get a prayer of Mordecai followed by a prayer of Esther. I think I have the order on that right. But I think what we can say for sure is that the Hebrew version has them at minimum trying to think outside of themselves a little bit, engage in this fasting. There's a preparation that needs to happen. She understands the stakes and she's taking charge of the situation. All right, I'll do it, but we're doing it my way. And I'm taking leadership on this. And this is what I want you to do. I'm not charging in there right now. There's going to be a time of focus and reflection. And I think, again, probably for most people participating, a moment of prayer that would have gone on with this as well, even though the text does not explicitly say so. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. No more chirping from Mordecai, no more, hey, you better do this or else that. He set up the rock in a hard place, metaphorical birth canal, test of character, look inside yourself ordeal for Esther. She went through that journey. She is mobilized. She is mobilizing others. And now, where just a few verses earlier, Mordecai had been in the driver's seat for this whole redemptive plan to solve the problem of this edict to kill the Jews, now Esther is in the driver's seat as we wrap up chapter 4 and pivot into chapter 5. I totally get and respect how others might look at this and read into it that Esther has had a spiritual epiphany and that now she is walking with God in clarity. As I read the text, it looks more to me like we're still a work in progress in that regard. But also, if we look at the big picture of the Old Testament, we see that God has often used people who are in a beginning stage, a juvenile stage of faith in Him and understanding in Him to accomplish very big things by His power, not by theirs. No matter how you slice it, it's time to get excited about Esther and her role in this story, but even more so, the providence of God that has been on display through these series of crazy circumstances through 4 chapters. The providence of God that Mordecai maybe accidentally acknowledges when he says, and who knows that you have come to a royal position for a time such as this. All of that is now coming into focus in terms of exactly how God's providence, in terms of the mechanics of it, is going to lead to this resolution. Okay, quick reminder. We're having a party to celebrate 1,000 episodes here. And by here, I mean like literally here in Rapid City, South Dakota. I haven't committed to the exact venue for that event yet because I'm still seeing how many of you are signing up. And well, apparently a lot of you want to come and celebrate, which I think is amazing. I'm going to meet so many people, and so will you, those of you who are coming. So if you haven't signed up yet, I mean, there's room. It's just a party. Everybody's invited. So come on out, bring the family. You can bring friends who don't even know what they're coming to celebrate. Everybody is welcome. We're going to keep all of you who've signed up to date as we get a clearer sense of a head count and where exactly we're going to meet in the late afternoon, early evening of September 25th. And then again, I also want to remind you that the next day on September 26th, I want to invite any of you who are involved in any kind of church ministry to come and hang out with me for a day. We're going to do an adorable mini conference about just what I'm seeing in my internet travels and some of the best ideas I've encountered regarding a philosophy of ministry in the age of the internet. I think it's going to be really, really super fun. Also, the Black Hills, where I live, are full of mystery and adventure and awesome things to go check out. Mount Rushmore, Crazy Horse Monument, Deadwood, Lead, Hot Springs. There's a jillion cool things to do. So if you're on the fence about it, let me just reiterate my invitation. I would love to hang out with you and have a celebration together that involves probably hot dogs and certainly at least one celebratory balloon on September 25th. You can learn more about it at thetmbh.com/event. All right. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.